My name is Bill Yannicke. As a member of First Presbyterian Church, I have had the privilege of serving on session and a number of boards and committees. Both of our scripture readings today highlight the importance of not assuming we know what someone needs. In our first reading, Job needs something very different than what Paul needs in the second reading. The book of Job is like a folk tale that probably originated outside of Hebrew mythology. And yet, because part of the Hebrew scriptures, most likely because it spoke the truth about life, which is that there isn't always a satisfactory explanation for what happens to us. Job lost all his livestock and servants in 3 different disasters, and all of his children were killed in a freak windstorm. Then Job was struck with sores all over his body. We might remember Job challenging God to explain this, but before he does that, something remarkable happens. That's where we pick up the story in Job chapter 2. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all these troubles that had come upon him, each of them set out from his home. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite. They met together to go and console and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him, and they raised their voices and wept aloud. They tore their robes and threw dust in the air upon their heads. They sat with him on the ground for 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his suffering was very great. Our next reading is from 2 Timothy. We are unsure of exactly when this letter was written, but many scholars think it most likely wasn't written by Paul himself, but by one of his disciples in the next generation. Suffice it to say that many of the letters attributed to Paul in the New Testament have an interesting history and background. For our purpose today, we are going to take the reading at face value, because in this reading, Paul did something that most of us rarely do today. He actually asked for what he needed. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, Paul writes, "Do your best to come to me soon, for Demas, in love with the present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescent had gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful in my ministry. I have sent Titius to Ephesus. When you come, bring the cloak that I left in Carpus at Taurus, also the books, and above all, the parchments. Alexander the coppersmith did me great harm. The Lord will pay him back for his deeds. You also must beware of him, for he strongly opposes our message. At my first defense, no one came to my support, but all deserted me. May it not be counted against them. But the Lord stood by me and gave me strength, so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed and all the Gentiles might hear it. So I was rescued from the lion's mouth. The Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and save me for his heavenly kingdom. To him be the glory forever and ever. Amen." A word of God that is still speaking. Thanks be to God.
Today, let's get personal. Many of you know the pastor over at Southern Heights here in town. Her husband suffered a massive stroke. Our whole lives have been upended. Lynn and Sandy, their son-in-law, passed away this week, and their daughter is facing a very different future than what she did when she and Joel got married. Luetta, beloved member of our congregation, is walking the final journey of her life. She so wants to make 100. Don't know if she'll make another 6 years. Many of you who are listening today, I know, have lost spouses with little or no warning. And we know asking why will get us nowhere. As much as we don't like to hear this, all these things I just mentioned, it's life. And no one is exempt from it. No one is exempt from the sorrows of life. Fortunately, no one is exempt from the joys of life either. But when the joys happen, we don't often end up asking, why, God, did this happen to me? Our question today is, what do you need? This, of course, follows last week's question of where do you hurt? And the hard part for a lot of us is when we ask, where do you hurt? We want to fix it. We don't like seeing our family and friends in pain, and when we love them, we want to take that away, so we want to fix it. But you know as well as I do that there's no fixing some things. But because we want to do something to make it better, we often resort to fixing things we can fix, such as dinner. When someone is hurting, we bring food. We offer to run errands, and because we can't really fix it, if we aren't careful, we try to fix it by explaining it. All of which is to say, sometimes we are more focused on what we need than the one who is hurting. We need to do something precisely because there really isn't anything we can do. My last year of seminary, I served as a hospital chaplain at a small church in Petaluma, California. For our training, we actually used the book of Job because his friends at first did everything right. And then they did everything wrong. Job lost everything. Talk about where do you hurt? He lost his business, his children, and his health, one right after another, barely enough time to breathe, much less grieve. When his friends heard about it, they did what friends do. They came together to console him. But when they got there, they saw just how devastated he was, and they ended up doing something that I think most of us have a hard time doing. They sat with him for 7 days and 7 nights and never said a word. They did not bring a casserole. They did not try to cheer him up. They just sat with him. That's hard because we don't want to just sit there. We want to do something. It's hard to feel helpless. But sometimes that is exactly what is needed. Because it's not about us. It's about them. Chaplain Remington Johnson said that during healthcare chaplain training, one of her supervisors would use the analogy of a person at the bottom of the hole, or a person at the bottom of a hole. Their job was not to offer them a rescue line and attempt to pull them out, but to descend into that hole, to bear witness to their reality and to be with them. We often talk about Jesus or being Jesus with flesh on. She was talking about how do we be the incarnation of Jesus to someone in need. It's a sacred act. Johnson points out that this is what we actually do every Sunday. We come together to witness one another's existence, traumas, and joys, and needs, and to spend time together. This is sacred space and sacred time. And that is what Job's friends did so perfectly for 7 days and 7 nights. They witnessed the sacredness of that moment. They sat in silence with Job and bore witness to his pain. But then Job broke his silence, and he vomited his pain and his anger and his grief all over his friends. Now remember I said that Job's friends started out by doing everything right and then they did everything wrong? Well, this is the moment that switched. Because instead of just letting Job be angry and grieve, his friend Eliphaz had to open his mouth, and he went straight into the fix-it mode. Here, Job, let me tell you why all this is happening to you. You must have done something to warrant this. And it just went downhill from there. Actually, it doesn't even matter if Eliphaz was right or not. It was not what Job needed right then. But here's the thing. If Eliphaz had asked Job what he needed, Job may not have been able to tell him. I think sometimes we really don't know what we need until after the fact. But when someone asks with genuine curiosity, and remember we talked about curiosity last week, it means diligence and care. When someone really comes with intentionality and care and asks us, what do you need? We know we've been seen. Even if we don't have an answer. There's a grace that comes just in asking the question. Because when we're asking the question, we're saying, I don't know what it is to be in your shoes. But I recognize your experience, and I am here however you need me. In Mark 10, when Jesus asked that blind man, what do you want me to do for you? In other words, what do you need? The man said, Rabbi, I want to see. And Jesus restored his sight. Now, I think Jesus knew what the man needed. But think about the respect he showed him by not assuming and instead asking. Because you see, that's the other mistake we make. We assume we know what other people need because, of course, it's what we would need if we were in their shoes, right? We look at someone who's down and out and we assume they need a job or a work ethic. When maybe what they really need is childcare so they could go to a job interview. We assume someone needs a hot meal because we see them on the side of the road with their hand out. But maybe what they really need is a grocery store with healthy options within walking distance. We assume we assume we know what someone needs. But so often we don't. We're guessing. Or we're guessing because we're thinking, well, if we were in their shoes, not that anyone could ever really be in someone else's shoes, but if we were in their shoes, we know this is what we'd need. But we aren't in their shoes, and we don't know the full story, and we don't know the background, and we don't know what's going on. And chances are then our assumptions are going to be totally wrong. We have to ask. Even if the other person doesn't know how to answer, we have to ask. Because that's how we show respect. And that's how we honor another person's reality and experience. And you know, if they don't have an answer, that's okay. We just sit with them. Now, what if you're the one who's been going through a difficult time and no one has asked you what you need? Well, you could tell them anyway. If you know what you need, ask for it. You're actually pretty fortunate if you have an idea of what that is. That's what Paul did. That's what we read in that letter to Timothy. Paul did not wait for someone to say, Paul, what do you need? He just came out and said, I need these things. Now, as you heard from Bill, some scholars think that this letter was written maybe a generation after Paul's death. But we're going to take it at face value. When you take it at face value, it's likely that Paul was in prison at this time, and he was alone. Demas deserted him and betrayed him. Crescens and Titus left him. We don't know why. Tychicus was sent away. Only Luke remained. Those are lonely words. Only Luke remained. Paul was clear about what he needed. He needed companionship. And he needed his coat, and his books, and his writing materials. He had a list. Now, it can be tempting when someone has a list of what they need for us to make our own assumptions about whether they really need that or not. Remington Johnson says that it's not unreasonable for us to have a conversation about what we can and cannot provide, but we must first trust the one we are meeting to know what they need. You can respond to someone's named needs with additions and clarifications, maybe even help them dig a little deeper to see what the real need is, help you understand that. But the first step is listening to them, fully hearing what they say their needs are. Because we are not them, and we are not in their shoes. If we assume we know what they need better than they do, then we're actually devaluing them. And you know what that's like. You've had people do this to you, assume they know what you need without ever asking, and you know how wrong they've been. Listening is a sacred act. It's a holy act of incarnation and curiosity and caring. And we begin the process by believing the person who says, this has been my experience, and this is what I need. Probably more common, though, really is people who don't tell us what they need. So honor that, too. They aren't required. There's nothing that says they owe you a list of what they need. They don't owe you the opportunity to do something for them. So just sit with them. Be the presence of Christ to them. They actually may not know what they need. I asked a friend the other day what she needed. She was going through a really rough time, and she said, I honestly don't know. I actually had two of you ask me this past week what I needed. I think you were looking ahead in the worship series and you saw this question come up. And my answer was the same as my friends. It's like, I really don't know what I need from you. I mean, I tend to be one of those people who thinks, I've got to do it all myself, and I'm not doing my job if I'm asking for help. I think it's part of my DNA, and at times that does get me into trouble. But it also means that if I do think of something, I'm probably not going to tell you because it often sounds paltry to me or unreasonable to ask for, so I don't ask. What's funny, though, is as I was working on this part of my sermon, I think I actually found an answer to the question of, what do you need? And it's going to sound a little self-serving when I say it in just a minute, but then again, anytime we ask for something for ourselves, it does sound a little self-serving, but I think it's ultimately what any of us needs. We need someone to just be with us. As Paul said, he needs companions. We need companions. Whether that is someone who just sits with us in the hospital waiting room, or someone who says, hey, let's go out to lunch and talk about things that really don't matter at all. Or let's go golfing, or let's just hang out. We need someone to just be with us. Maybe we need them to remind us that we're not our work. We are not whatever challenge has entered our life. And we are not alone. Remember what Pastor Remington Johnson said? She said, this is what we do every Sunday. We come together to witness one another's existence and traumas and joys and needs, and to spend time together. And whenever we do that, it's sacred time and sacred space. So may you not be afraid to ask for what you need. May you not be afraid to say, I need a companion. I need someone to help me. I need someone to either walk this journey with me or sit with me on this journey. I need someone to remind me that my story is valid, to remind me that I'm a child of God. Don't be afraid to ask for what you need. And may we also set aside our natural desire to fix things. I know for a lot of us, that's going to be the harder piece. We want to fix things. We don't like to see our families and our friends and people suffering. We want to fix it. But not everything is fixable. So may we set aside our natural desire to fix things and just be with another in their need. Be the presence of Christ to them. In just a moment, we will hear the music, Make Me a Channel of Your Peace. It's from one of our previous worship services. It's also known as a prayer of St. Francis, just a little historical note here that it probably doesn't go back to St. Francis. Even the Franciscans don't include this in their prayers of St. Francis. But whoever did write it knew the power of incarnation, of simply being present and being Christ to one another. So as you listen to the words, I invite you to think about who God might be nudging you to reach out to. Who needs you to ask of them, what do you need? And whom might you be Christ to?